There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children lose it. Let the children use it. Let all the children boogie.
Welcome to the college football playoff.
It doesn't get any better than this in college football.
Two games that give us everything we want and the one thing we need, an answer.
The end zone, touchdown, Alabama. This is going the distance.
Good evening and welcome to the Nuts and Bolts Sports College Football Playoff Preview Show. Of course, I am your host, owner and operator of Nuts and Bolts Sports, or Team NBS as we like to call it, Joe Cardoza, here to break down the two important games we got going on. We have the Cotton Bowl, where we'll see Alabama go up against Cincinnati. And then we also have the Orange Bowl, where we'll see the Michigan Wolverines go up against the Georgia Bulldogs. Of course, I cannot do this by myself, so I'm joined by Nuts and Bolts Sports, NFL Draft, and college football experts and gurus, and I want to go ahead and bring them onto the show. First person I want to welcome is Mr. Bill Carroll onto the show. How you doing, Bill?
I'm in hog heaven at this point, Joe. This is, to sort of paraphrase Bill Parcells, this is why you lift all them weights, right? This is indeed my time of year. I have been swimming in football, and I'm a shark.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. We just saw a fantastic end to the Music City Bowl, which I think defense was a four-letter word, but that's what we're here for. We just love college football. And also joining us this evening is our senior NFL draft analyst, Mr. Jeff Barnes. How you doing this evening, Jeff?
Glad to be back, man. It's been too long since I got to sit on the Nuts and Bolts Sports airwaves.
Absolutely, yeah. I was talking to you before. I was like, man, I don't think I've hosted, but it's like my second career start, man. I've always been a slot receiver.
You're the boss. You got to sit in the big chair sometimes.
Hey, well, I know one route I can run still, even with my old age, is the fade route. I can still do a fade. The stop and go might be over with, but that fade route, I'm still money on that.
Every once in a while, you get to be Spielberg.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can also do a mean. I'm also a mean run blocker. So if we're gonna do a running play, I'm your guy. I can definitely peel off on somebody.
There you go.
Well, let's jump right into this, gentlemen, and talk about the first game we're going to talk about, and that's the Alabama Crimson Tide going up against the Cincinnati Bearcats. Of course, Cincinnati, one of the biggest, if not the biggest stories of the college football season, somebody outside the Power Five to make it into the Final Four. This is not your average football team by any stretch of the imagination, Cincinnati, right, Jeff?
Absolutely. We're talking about the American Conference, the conference that everybody considers the little brother. Well, we saw what happened when we had an undefeated UCF team, didn't get into the playoff, went on to the bowl game and beat Auburn. Well, this team is a bit different. This one's a lot more complete than what we've seen in the past from our American Conference teams. This Cincinnati team is a very powerful offensive team, but most importantly, defensively, and we'll put that on the board later. Defensively, they're a very, very stout unit that can compete with almost anybody.
And what are your feelings when it comes to this team coming up there, Bill?
The thing that I'll be looking for will be the interior of both lines. As we know, if we watch Alabama had kind of a turnstile at center early in the year, and finally they landed on Seth McLaughlin, and he sort of solidified. But it's happened very late in the year. I mean, we're talking about right before the Iron Bowl, basically. They finally sort of started to figure it out. And if Curtis Brooks, who is a very active, and when I say active, I mean active, he leads the Bearcats in sacks from the interior. You don't often see a D tackle being the guy who's leading a team in sacks. So that's a key matchup. We're going to see a lot of those key matchups as we break this game down. I'm excited. I'm so excited to talk about and later see this game.
Now, one question I have for both of you, and you guys can pick who wants to go first, is obviously there's been a lot of talk about, oh my God, it's Alabama. We know how Nick Saban is when he has time to prepare. This is going to be a blowout. I, for one, think this is going to be a great football game. It's probably going to go down to the wire. What is your feeling ahead of this game?
I'll let you go first, Bill.
Obviously, I think people who are predicting a blowout have simply not watched Cincinnati play football. That's what I'm going to assume, that they're just sort of going off of name or reputation or brand or identity or something. This is a solid football team. I'm not saying they don't have weaknesses. They don't have the kind of speed on the outside that normally gives teams like Alabama trouble when they don't have a great secondary. But they have pretty much everything else on offense. Since they don't have that one sort of big play guy, they have a bunch of players who are very solid, know their roles. Alec Pierce is a big receiver who really knows how to work the middle of the field. They have a really talented tight end in Josh Wiley. They have some guys, but they don't have that guy, one guy who's just going to blow past people. That's the one thing they sort of lack, is that one sort of big play wide receiver. They have pretty much everything else. On defense, they've got somebody who I love at every level of that defense. I mean, Beavers is not getting enough attention. They're just solid everywhere. They have backup safeties who I believe will play in the NFL. This is an incredibly deep defense. So those who are thinking it's going to be just a flat out blowout, I don't know. Might Alabama pull away down the stretch? Sure, I can see that happening. It being a 10, maybe even 14-point win. But people talk about a blowout, 30, 40 points. I just don't see that.
And what about you, Jeff?
Indeed. And I'm going to mirror exactly what he said. You're talking about a team that we talked about the defense, and we'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. But the offense, we talk about Desmond Ridder against a very stout Bama defense. And Desmond Ridder is one of those quarterbacks. We talk about him as a draft prospect. He's grown over his time at Cincinnati. This year, you've seen him match up against some very tough defenses, was able to move the ball consistently against a very tough Notre Dame defense. And when you look at what they have running the football, Cincinnati's big play wide receivers and tight ends. So you're talking about an offense that's diverse enough to compete with Bama's defense. And Bama's defense, we've seen have their struggles this year. We saw how they struggled against Mississippi State. We saw how they struggled against A&M at times. Right? So this is a team where you look at it, if Bama's not playing like they did versus Auburn, where they were able to at least hold Auburn to 10 points before they had to make that furious comeback. But at least their defense kept them in the game. If they can keep Cincinnati's offense down and continue to score points, that's when Cincinnati will be in trouble. Because I don't think you want to see Cincinnati getting into a shootout with Bama. I think you want to see a game where they're able to control the pace and keep the ball, minimize the amount of times Bryce Young has the ball versus their defense. I think there's going to be a great matchup, and we'll talk about that. But as far as Cincinnati is scoring on Bama's defense, what they're going to have to do is control the tempo of this game, right? Use that running game to wear down that front. Use play action to take your shots down the field, and they have the big play receivers to do it.
Now, when we flip the script and talk about Alabama and that offense, of course, a lot of Alabama fans are saying that the Georgia game was the wake-up call. Everything came together. All the errors and mistakes and struggles we saw during the regular season are magically gone and disappeared. I, for one, am not really buying that. I mean, I obviously think it was a great building block. I mean, obviously, it's an SEC championship game. What better time to have your best performance of the year than when it really counts and it kind of earns you a spot in the Final Four? You have the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Bryce Young. But one big factor for Alabama is, of course, you have John Mechie, who's not going to be playing in that game. That's a big play receiver, a threat. We all think about Devontae Smith, some of the other guys that have been in Alabama when it comes to wide receiver position. Losing him is a big loss. What do you think? We'll start with you this time, Jeff. Alabama on the offensive side of the ball, what do they need to establish? What they need to do early and often against Cincinnati to be successful?
Well, what they're going to have to do is run the football and use that staple. We talk about Cincinnati, they're an athletic defense. Their secondary is outstanding. But you can run the football with the size they have at Alabama on that line of scrimmage. If they can move that front, that odd front of Cincinnati, they're going to make it hard for Cincinnati to get traction on defense. Because if they're running the football, they're going to have to take a lot of chances on defense. And there'll be a matchup where they can exploit. And we know about the tight ends that Bama has. They're a tough matchup. So if they can run the football, get the play action game going, get Bryce Young on the edge a couple of times, make that front work hard to stop the run, it'll slow down the pass rush enough for them to take chances in the secondary.
And what are you looking for on the offensive side from Alabama there, Bill?
So this may surprise some people. This Alabama rushing attack has averaged 4.06 yards per rush. That's the worst since Saban's first year at Alabama, 2007. So if they struggle to run the football, and obviously they once again have a Heisman Trophy winner and still have Jameson Williams, but When you're throwing the football when you have to throw the football, it's not the same as throwing the football when you want to throw the football. So if they bottle up Brian Robinson and the other running backs for Alabama, that then frees them up, and they have some very exotic pressures. I mean, I can't wait till we get into some of Cincinnati's exotic stuff they do in terms of pressure packages. And people say Saban had this extra time to prepare. Well, guess what? So did Luke Fickell and the rest of his coaching staff, and he has a really good coaching staff. So to me, if Alabama's averaging 4.5 or more yards per carry, that probably signals victory for them. And if they're under 4 yards per carry, I think that probably signals a loss for them, or at least a very tight game that they have to try to throw their way out of.
Yeah, I think that this Alabama team, when you compare it to some of the teams you've seen in the past, it's not as strong, but it's strong enough to get the job done, obviously, and earn a spot in the Final Four, which just shows you the terrific job that Nick Saban's done recruiting-wise. When you can say, man, this is not his best team, but oh yeah, by the way, they have a chance to compete for a national championship. That kind of lets you know what everybody else around the nation's dealing with in terms of Nick Saban and his coaching prowess. Let's go to Jeff, who's at the board now. We're going to do a little deep dive and talk a little bit more about what you should expect tomorrow.
Sorry, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Give me 1 second. I have some technical difficulties.
Well, it's a nice board.
It's a great board.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Let's break this down, Coach.
All right. So when we're talking about this defense, we're talking about it. All right. So Cincinnati's defense, we talked about it, odd front. All right. Very light, though. All right. They have some solid-sized defensive linemen, but pretty light at the backer position. So what you're looking at is 5 DBs on the field. The best formula for Cincinnati is disguise their fronts, bring a lot of mixed pressure, give a lot of different looks and coverage, but use those talented corners. All right. So we know about Sauce Gardner. We talked about Kobe Bryant on the outside. These guys are able to match up all over the field with wide receivers. This will be a good test for them, matching up against Bama's wide receivers who are pretty fast. So you're going to get a good matchup on the outside. If I'm Cincinnati, this is where it's got to be. You got to impact these guys by controlling this line of scrimmage. So what they're going to want to do is use different things. So play matchup football. All right. So what we want to get is match up here, and match up here. All right. This allows you to play different options with your linebackers and safeties. All right. So if you're worried about strong side run, it's real simple. All right. You're going to slant these guys. All right. And bring him off the outside for quarterback and contain. All right. This allows these guys to remain free, and any extra spillage, your safeties have to come up. All right. This is going to allow you to control this Bama running game. All right. This allows you to get your best guys in coverage. All right. Now, if you start to struggle, start to give up some big plays, well, you're running in 2 shell. Okay. Now you can play your cover 2, jam up, safeties over the top, and still now you can crash this front, right, and allow these backers to step up for outside run, and he's got flow inside. All right. So still, you have the ability with help from the safeties in the running game. Right. Take care of the run. Worry about pass. Whether you're going to man up, whether you're going to come down in coverage and zone. All right. But you can mix it up. Mix up the fronts. Right. Walking backers up to the line of scrimmage. And stepping him outside, giving him a double A gap look. They're going to have to do all of this to mess with Bryce Young. Make him think, hold the football, allow this pass rush to get there, let these guys cover. So this is going to be the main formula if you're Cincinnati to disrupt this Bama offense.
And
Awesome.
didn't Alabama use some like double eagle and some air fronts to give them trouble?
Come again, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was saying, isn't that one of the things we saw Auburn do? Was go double eagle and use some bear fronts to give them trouble?
Yes, and what they were doing, Auburn was able to do is reduce these guys inside, cover every lineman. So this way they can't combo to the second level. It makes it harder to run those inside zone runs when you can't combo the point of attack. So what you're going to do is you cover every lineman, This way, it makes these guys block one-on-one just like they're in man. Okay? This allows your linebackers to be clean. So if there is a crease, if they do get a little bit of movement, your back is quick to fill because he's not being touched. The main thing is to keep the backers clean.
Now, I'd have to say, and tell me if I'm wrong if you guys disagree with me, but this is going to be the best defense that Bryce Young's faced all season. I know people talk about the SEC and SEC speed, and the SEC can do no wrong. But, I mean, you got two NFL-bound corners playing for Cincinnati, a strong pass rushing end, a pretty decent linebacker, above average decent linebacking core for Cincinnati. It's going to be a lot of pressure on Bryce Young to perform at a high level in this game. Don't you guys think?
Well, as I said before, if they can't run the ball, you're going to see some trouble. So what I'm anticipating is they're probably going to start moving Bryce Young if indeed they do struggle a little bit in protection. And he's a good athlete. He's a very good athlete. And they'll probably mix in some design QB runs, both teams, in fact. I think that's another one of the things that are sort of aren't being talked about enough is how much both teams may mix in some designed QB run. Because, as people have mentioned in the past, when Alabama has struggled, what's one of the components that's caused them to struggle, even when they had some of their better defenses, was mobile quarterbacks. Now, Desmond Ridder's not a flyer. He's not a 4-4 guy or even probably a 4-5 guy. But my sort of nickname for him was Kaepernick at 33 1/3. He's a guy who's a long strider, and once he builds up to speed, he can pull away from people, but it takes him a while to get up there. He's not super quick, but he's a good runner, and you do enough with him, getting him on the move, that he can extend plays and even just hurt you a little bit. Now, Bryce Young's a little more quick twitch. He can go, but he's also a smaller framed guy. So you have to balance that. Like, how much do you want him to carry the ball? Because if a 240-pound, 250-pound human being, actually squares him up, you might be having to warm up your backup. So you've got to be really judicious in how much you run a guy like Bryce, but he's a really good athlete. So I think that when I said that 4.5, being sort of that target mark, Bryce Young may be a big part of that, because quarterback runs, especially if they are unexpected, can get you chunks, 12, 8, 20 yards, which you don't normally get in your run game. And what I'm also going to expect, or wonder if we'll see, which team will dial up some exotics. Both of these teams don't like to, go too much into the trick bag or whatever, but one of them will, right? And I want to see which one does that, which one's willing to go ahead and say, we're going to do something a little unexpected, a little something, strange, whether it might be, a double pass, a reverse, even some of those things where you, a shovel series where because a lot of times when a team is super aggressive coming up field, just like a normal draw can gash that, a shovel can gash that. Where a guy that you think is there to protect the quarterback and the quarterback drops back a couple of steps and then boop, he just shovels it into the guy that you thought was there to protect the quarterback. If he's up the field, he catches a gap. You could be talking about a big play that way. So I'll be interested to see what team, throws in some tendency breakers.
Yeah, and I appreciated how today I saw you try to kind of try to put Coach Fickle in a pickle. Say that 5 times fast. And you asked him about trick plays and going exotic. That's something he's going to do. And he didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He kind of went into a conversation about analytics. But you definitely tried to pull some. I like the way you did that there. You tried to get something out of him. I was like, if Bill gets out this guy, I'm going to be very impressed.
No, it's not his first rodeo. He wasn't going to give away these state secrets. But twinkle in his eye. He gave a little twinkle in his eye. I have a feeling we're going to see something.
Absolutely, absolutely. So another question I had is a guy from Alabama that we've all been talking about. If you watch college football, you know all about him. And I want to get your thoughts on him, Jeff, not just in this game, but a little bit too moving forward to the next level. And that's Will Anderson, a guy that has a capability of taking over an entire game and shutting down the offenses. How big of a part of this game is he going to have to be for Alabama to be successful?
Big time, because what's going to happen is you're going to need to control the line of scrimmage just like they're going to need to control the line of scrimmage against you. All right. We know that Cincinnati is a ferocious pass rush. All right. The passing game as far as throwing down the field. So you're going to need to, make sure Cincinnati can't, control the sticks, control the down and distance, move the football on the ground. So they're going to have to be able to win first and second down. Right. This will allow them to put pressure on Desmond Ridder. So he's got to have a big hand in controlling first and second down.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Bill, what do you think is going to be expected from Anderson?
Well, I mean, I'm sliding protections his way because unlike other years, they don't have that other guy. There's not another guy over there who is at least right now, looks like a top 50 kind of player. And very often they've had multiple guys who are going to be first and second round draft picks, sometimes multiple first round draft picks who are coming off the edges. They have one. So that guy's getting chipped. He's going to see, he's going to see sometimes some double teams. He's going to see sometimes I'm going to run things at him. I'm going to try to see if I can even sucker him, right? Get him upfield and run stuff behind him. I mean, they really only have it's a solid defensive line, don't get me wrong, but that's the only guy that you see wrecking games, right? He's a game wrecker. The other guys are solid guys. They're going to be good NFL players. They're going to, have 6, 7, 8 year careers, but that's the one guy that you can't let beat you in my mind. Because as was said before, this is not a vintage Saban defense. This is not
at all
where they're just loaded. And oh my God, how can you hope to move the football? Gosh, we just want to get to double-figure points. No, this isn't that defense. This is not your older brother's Alabama defense. So if they can run the ball enough that they are now, as you said, somewhat favorable downs and distances, you're getting to 2nd and 4, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. Now you're nullifying that rush a little bit, right? Because there's always that chance you could run the ball because you've shown you can run the ball. So that's the first thing. You sort of pull some of the fangs out of that monster, right? Because now they've got to at least respect your run, and now it sets up play action passing. And though they don't have that singular deep threat, they do have, like I said, Alec Pierce, a guy who's sort of in that Joe Jaravicious, Ed McCaffrey kind of role. You're right. Yeah, that big-bodied, runs a little bit better than you might have expected just looking at him, but not a true deep threat. But he can hurt you in the middle of the field. And then they have a tight end who might be the best pure athlete amongst their receiving group, even though he's a tight end in Wild. I mean, he's a big kid, but he can run. He's probably I'd be interested to see just what he runs when they actually time him. But he looks fast, and I've seen him, like I said, run away from safeties, run away from linebackers. So what you want to do is you want to create that bind, right? So we talked about play actions, one way creating that bind. The other way, of course, is running those high-low concepts where, there's a slant with a dig behind it, or there's curl, right, you run curls with maybe a corner route or something so that you've got enough eye candy that maybe you get someone to bite on that, and that's how you might get that big play, because they don't have those guys who are just going to simply blow past defenders.
Now, who's one player from Cincinnati before? And I'll ask Bill about Alabama, but for you, Jeff, who's one guy on the Cincinnati Bearcats team that's going to have to perform like at an elite level, or even at the level they've been performing at all season? Just got to bring their A game. Who's one player from Cincinnati that's going to have to absolutely perform for these guys to have a chance in this ball game?
Well, listen, all the pressure in the world is going to be on Desmond Ridder, right? The offense, if they're going to match points with Bama, if they're going to be able to beat Bama, you're going to have to score. This is not going to be a 10-7 ball game. These teams are going to find the end zone at some point. They're both going to find their rhythm. Right? If that's the case, it's all going to be on Desmond Ridder. Yes, you're going to be able to run. You want to try to run the football, but he's got to make the big throws in the key moments. He can't turn the ball over. He can't give Bama that extra possession. He's got to play the best game at this point of his career that he's played so far in order to beat this opponent. Because plain and simple, there's still, when it comes down to it, 11 on 11, the talent leans towards Bama. But however, they can execute with Bama any day of the week. So if he is out there and is leading this offense the way he's capable of, then they'll be able to come out there and pull off the upset.
And when we talk about Alabama, Bill, who's the one player from Alabama that's got to show up and show out?
It's going to be an answer that most people aren't expecting. It's their right tackle, Chris Owens. Not usually the guy you sort of focus on when you talk about a key player, but truly Chris Owens is a key player. When Alabama has struggled, and let's not forget, despite all the accolades we tend to throw at Alabama's offenses, they have really allowed a fair amount of pressure. Bryce Young, I think, is in the top. I think he might be the fourth most pressured quarterback in college football, which is a testament, one, to his mental toughness and his, what a good athlete he is, that he still managed to produce at this level, despite the fact that he's been pressured a fair amount. And a lot of those pressures were coming from the right tackle position. Chris Owens sort of righted the ship, as we mentioned in that Auburn. The Auburn game was sort of a come to Jesus moment. And then after the Auburn game, you saw better play from Chris Owens. But Chris Owens, who had lost his job, in fact, at one point, and then got his job back about halfway through the third quarter of the Iron Bowl, has played better since. But to me, that's the key. If they're able to get flow through to disrupt the running game, and of course, obviously the quarterback, if they're just coming through, then this is going to be a very tight game. And if Chris Owens has the game of his life, that might be the key to Alabama maybe winning comfortably. But I think that's the key player. I don't want to say he's the weak link, but he certainly had struggles at various points this season. And when he's played better, their offense is very hard to stop.
Well, I think we did a very comprehensive breakdown for this game. So now it's kind of time for the nitty gritty. See who's going to be brave to take it out, who's going to be brave to go out there and pick against Alabama. I, for one, think it's going to be a very competitive game. I think Cincinnati's going to do really well and do a good showing for themselves. You know what? I changed my mind. Literally, this is 5 seconds. I'm picking the upset, guys. I'm going to go 27-24. Cincinnati shocks the world because this is like Bill said, this is not your older brother's Alabama team. So I think Cincinnati has some dudes on their team, man. The amount of disrespect they got through the whole season. Yes, they made it to the Final Four, but just think about the struggle it was to make it to the Final Four. When the rankings were being released every week, the committee was doing everything in their power, it felt like to me, to not have Cincinnati in there. And then the extra time to prepare for this as well, I'm going 27-24 Cincinnati.
I applaud your courage. Right. It's like, go get him.
Lone Wolf, I am
going to say that I don't think Alabama covers. I will go that far. I don't think Alabama covers. I don't think Alabama covers the spread. I think the spread's a little too generous. I think these teams are much more closely matched than people think. But I think Alabama does manage to come up with a couple of big plays late and ends up 10-14 point victory probably in my mind. But people were thinking it's going to be a blowout. I just think those people are going to be proven very wrong.
Jeff?
All right. I'm going to pick Bama. And the reason why I'm going to pick Bama, I just think it's going to be too many field goals for Cincinnati. I think my score is going to be 24-16. Okay. I think it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a one-score difference, but I think they're going to get to the red zone a few times, but stall out and get field goals. We know their field goal kicker is inconsistent. They do several of those. All right. So it's going to come down to they're going to get a couple of them. They're going to miss a couple. And after a while, they're just going to stop trying it. And it's going to be all or nothing for the end zone. So I think overall, they're not going to allow Bama to blow them away. I think they're going to keep Bama in this close enough to reach, but not to grab. So I'm going to go 24-16 Bama.
So 2 people for Alabama, and I am the lone wolf who is with Cincinnati. Don't let the Bearcats win. You guys better turn your phones off.
You know what? I hope I am wrong. I would love to hear if you just trash talk me forever. One thing I love the way that Bearcats team is put together, and I'm a big Luke Fickell fan. So I hope I'm wrong. I would love to hear you. I'll eat all the crow. I will barbecue it. I will make the sauce myself. I'll be thrilled to be wrong on this one.
I usually never go against Nick Saban, but like I said, I just think Cincinnati's a different type of team, man. It's not this, we're just happy to be here. Look at the pretty swag bag they gave us. They're here to play ball. They're here to play ball for sure.
And they proved that when they beat Notre Dame. They were saying, we're here. This is our year. We're here to make a statement. And plain and simple, they're going to come out and they're going to give Bama everything they can handle. I think in the end of the day, when you look at these 2 teams, how they play, I just think field goals are going to show up instead of touchdowns, and that's going to be the shortcome for me.
Yeah, that's you definitely can't get field goals. And also another big thing too is when Cincinnati encounters adversity, whether it's a fumble, interception, give up a big play, you got to shake it off and bounce back. So many times teams play against Alabama, you get punched in the mouth and just never get back off the canvas. You can't let that happen.
Yeah, once they land that big shot, they'll flurry you real fast.
Yeah, exactly. You can't let it snowball. You got to fight back. Well, you're listening to the College Football Playoff Preview Show on Nuts and Bolts Sports. Joe Cardoza, Jeff Barnes, and Bill Carroll. We'll be right back and talk about the Orange Bowl after this commercial break. Welcome back to the Nuts and Bolts Sports College Football Playoff Preview Show. Now, I'm going to try to leave emotion out of this one the best I can. No promises being made. And of course, I'm talking about the Orange Bowl where my Michigan Wolverines have made it. Jim Harbaugh, man, talk about four-leaf clover. And our reward for making it to the Final Four is a matchup against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. A team that's definitely coming off a tough loss, obviously, in the SEC championship game, but also kind of the same boat as Michigan as far as like always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Not as bad as Michigan, but Kirby Smart, big expectations in Georgia, another opportunity to fight for a national championship. I'll start off with you, Jeff, this time. Kind of what's your expectations of this matchup and this game?
Well, since you're a Michigan fan, you couldn't ask for a better opponent. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when you look at Georgia, this is the team, if you're going into the playoff and you want to meet in that first round, you match up very well with. All right. Georgia's got this one of the best defenses we've seen in a long time when it comes to college football. But offensively, they are very, very susceptible to upset. All right. And we saw that when they played in the SEC title game. Right. When you would figure out how to get pressure on their quarterback, confuse him so he holds the football too long, they will turn the ball over. They will stall out on offense. And all of a sudden, that invincible Georgia team looks very beatable. Michigan has the ability to put pressure on the passer. They have the ability to stop the run. Okay. There's times they get gashed in the run, too. We saw against Ohio State. Although they beat Ohio State, they have problems stopping the run in that game. Right. Georgia's going to test your run defense. But if you can hold them in situations where and you can get pressure on the quarterback, these quarterbacks are going to throw you an interception if you pressure them, right? We've seen it. They're not when we talked about it. These guys, Stetson Bennett, right? These guys are guys who you put pressure on them, they turn the ball over, right? So I think this is one of those cases where Michigan gets the right matchup and has a very good chance of pulling off the upset.
And what do you think, Bill?
I think that this is going to be an extremely fun game, particularly if you like line play. We talked about line play. This game's going to be all about each team's ability to keep from that sort of tackle to tackle, right? I mean, there'll be some outside stuff going on. Don't get me wrong, but most of this game will be decided between the tackles. Both teams would prefer to run the ball between the tackles. And for the most part, when these teams want to throw the ball, though sometimes you see Michigan attack, wide in the throw game, they also like to throw the ball in the middle of the field. And Stetson Bennett, who I think is somewhat disrespected, but just because of some of his own physical limitations, generally tends to throw the ball more likely towards the middle of the field than outside the numbers, just because he doesn't have the world's strongest arm. But here's a sort of a fun fact. He's actually, in terms of passing efficiency, the highest ranked of all the quarterbacks of the four. I don't think most people would guess that. Now, some of that is skewed a little bit because he doesn't have to throw the ball as much, and so there's many fewer interceptions or chances for interception, and many fewer chances for incompletion. So he has a very high efficiency because of that. But he is, a little better than people give him credit for being. He's not probably a big time NFL prospect, simply because he lacks things physically that NFL teams want in a quarterback. But he's a very good college quarterback, and like I said, being a little bit disrespected. And then in McNamara, you have somewhat the same sort of story. I mean, there's Michigan fans who still want to bench him, right? Both guys, both the quarterbacks, the starting quarterbacks and teams have a chance to play for the
fan over here that wants to bench him.
Right. You're not the only one, right? So both teams have had people calling for the number 2 quarterback to come in for the guy who's starting, who's led the teams to this point. It's interesting that both teams have many people in their fan base who are not satisfied with the quarterback play. But running the ball is obviously at the heart of what both teams want to do. I mean, we've seen at times Michigan go literally to the old Maryland power I. I mean, where you're just lighting up big bodies, right? And just slamming the ball in there. They'll have 2, and sometimes they'll go to 13 personnel, just like we saw at Stanford when Harbaugh was there. They'll have 3 tight ends on the field, 2 running backs. Who needs receivers? So
very old school football. I like it.
Right, it's very old school.
Bo Schembechler would love this Michigan team.
He would love it. And it's very strength against strength, right? Because the strength of Georgia, obviously, and people have talked about it all year long, is that group of monsters that they put in there, George Davis, Jalen Carter, and Devontae Wyatt, who are all enormous, large, angry people who are all going to make a lot of money playing football in their lives. So to me, that's where the game will be decided. The interior of both lines.
Now, you talked about being disrespected. I want to ask you about the Georgia defense. Obviously, that was the tout. They were highly touted all season long. Yep. People thought they were just going to – well, they did ride it to the Final Four. But obviously, you saw what happened in their last ball game. Totally uncharacteristic of what we saw from Georgia all season long. Having this much time to prepare, they've probably watched that film too many times. How hungry do you think that Bulldogs defense is to get back on the field and punch somebody in the mouth that's not wearing a Georgia uniform? Right.
They have something to prove, obviously, after being told. Now, and once again, what's the term that Coach Saban used? Rat poison, right? All that rat poison out there about, is this the best defense in the history of college football? Well, no, but it's a really good defense. And particularly, once again, that, like I said, that interior. Then they have, good guys coming off the edges too, don't get me wrong. But to me, it's about the interior. If they dominate on the interior, that sets everything up, right? Because Michigan really wants to do most of their business on the interior. They'll run some things. They'll run sweeps. They'll run some stuff outside. They'll even do
They'll go exotic. They'll run some exotic plays.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see at least 2
You'll
or
even
3.
see like tight end sweeps. You'll see, they know their tight ends are good with the ball. And Schoonmaker particularly is good with the ball in his hands. They'll find little ways to get, some of those orbit motion, sweeps and things like that, and fly sweeps. And they'll do that. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But that's not the heart. Like, that's the,
bells and whistles.
That's the antipasto, right? That's not the meal. But the meal is banging it up there between the tackles. And that's somewhat true for both teams. And so if you can indeed put the game in the hands of the quarterbacks, I like McNamara slightly more of the two. If they're forced to win a game when they're throwing the football, Michigan is slightly better at that if they have to do it. But once again, and now I'm doing the thing I accuse everyone else of doing, but Bennett's better than people think. Like I keep saying that despite the fact that he's not some, big time stud of a prospect, he's a smart kid. He's tough as nails. And despite not having a cannon for an arm, he's a very efficient. And I know the term game manager has been kind of turned into an insult.
Don't say that.
Well, I mean, I don't know why people think it's an insult. I mean, Joe Montana described himself as a game manager. He said that was my job, was to manage the game, right? Well, you want someone who doesn't manage the game? I mean, I don't know why people have made it such a pejorative term. But when he's keeping things on time, when he's doing things the way that keep that offense moving, and obviously the run game is a big part of that, they're capable of really, really, really giving people trouble. But we saw what happens when, one, they are putting those third and longs. That's not their thing. Like, that's not their jam.
Yeah, if Georgia's having to pass the ball every single time on third down because they have to and not because they want to, they're going to be in trouble for sure.
Correct. And that's what it comes down to for both teams in my mind.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Let's go ahead and head over to the board and Jeff for some in-depth breakdown.
Absolutely. And Bill's absolutely right. When we were talking about the interior of that defense, all right? So when you talk about it, here's Michigan's offense matched up against Georgia's defense, right? So right on that nose is big number 99. He's a hard man to move. He's been one of the reasons why Michigan's defense has been stout all year. Right? If you can't get movement inside, and this is the guy when everybody likes to run inside zone versus odd fronts, this is the important player. This is the guy that everybody has struggled to move, which is why they've been tough to run the ball on. Right? Bama found a way to move them, right? But they were able to loosen up the coverage. All right. So 99, 95. All right. Wyatt. These two guys control the line of scrimmage. They make it hard for those linemen to get to the linebackers because they demand a double team. They demand a combo block at the line of scrimmage if you want to try to run the football. Well, guess what? Michigan loves to run the football. That is Jim Harbaugh's staple. Right? He loves to run. Guess what? 2 tight ends. Right? So you're going to see these guys split on both sides of the line. You'll see them stacked on the same side. Right? You're going to see everything with this. Right? He's going to try and get this going. But Jim Harbaugh is going to be stubborn. He's going to want to run the football because, one, he's going to want to get that going. He wants to slow these guys pass rush down, guys. He wants to make these linebackers here, right, respect, especially Walker. Right? This is the guy. This is the stud because these two guys are able to control the line of scrimmage. So he's going to really want to make sure that he can get Haskins going so McNamara can use the play-action game and work the ball outside, right, to Wilson and Johnson. So big matchup on the outside, but realistically, this is where the battle is going to be won inside here on the trenches. So Bill's exactly right? If Georgia continues to control the interior of the offensive line, this is going to be a hard battle for Michigan.
Now, of course, we talked about this game is going to be won in the trenches, and it's going to come down to, I think, which quarterback can make the play. You have to make a lot of plays, but you have to make the play. Talking about running game is talking about having to make a play. I think special teams is going to field position, and special teams will play a big factor in this game, obviously, as we know. And one player who I think a lot of people aren't talking about, I think Bowers from Georgia could have a big, big game. The Michigan linebackers are going to have to really contain him. He's a guy that if Georgia's forced to throw the ball, he's probably going to be option A and option 1B as well. What kind of a factor do you think he's going to be in this game, Bill?
Well, I'm assuming they're going to move him around. And though we call him a tight end, he's really just a large receiver. He blocks well enough, but he's not like Michigan's tight ends who, once again, as you said about Bo Schembechler, they block like guys used to block. While in Bowers, he blocks how tight ends block nowadays. He's getting in there, he's giving good effort, but he's not putting guys on their backs on the regular basis. But he is a terrific route runner. He has great hands. He's an extremely tough matchup for anybody. I mean, because he can body up and overwhelm physically defensive backs, and he can run away from virtually every linebacker in college football, with maybe a handful of exceptions. Now, the thing that I think that might be the play might not be a deep pass, but might be just a little swing route or maybe a wheel route to Blake Corum. And Blake Corum makes somebody miss, and then he's off to the races. He's a really good receiver. He's a difficult person for linebackers to stay with. And I would run him on some option routes. I'd run him on some wheels. I'd run him on some flats. And that gives you a way to get some of that pressure off of your quarterback because they're going to want, obviously, to hit your quarterback because that's what every defense wants to do. And then on the other side, the same thing's somewhat true for Bennett because, we've got probably 2 top 50 players. Well, one guy is a top 5 player, maybe a top 1 player in Aiden Hutchinson. And then obviously with the Ojabo having, come on throughout the season, that's going to be the big test for on the other side. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who has the best answers to getting that pressure release off of your quarterback.
So let's talk a little bit, Jeff, and go back to the board about the Georgia offense and what they're going to be trying to do against this Michigan defense, which is no slouch themselves as well.
Well, absolutely. We were talking about the size and girth of the Georgia defense. Well, when you look at Michigan's side, it's a little bit different, right? It's a lot more speed, a lot more athleticism. They run a version of that Ravens defense, all right, bro? So what you're going to have is a lot of complex looks. You got 2 very good edge rushers. So there's going to be challenges for those Georgia tackles protecting their quarterback, right? No matter which one it is, they're going to be under pressure. They're going to bring it. They're going to bring it from different angles. They're going to switch up coverages. They're going to switch up looks. So if Georgia doesn't get the running game going, they're going to struggle on offense because, plain and simple, the way Michigan is going to attack them with the weapons that they have on defense is going to cause their quarterbacks, if they have to rely to win this game, they better have perfect protection, and they better have a running game that's going to allow them to run play action.
Yeah, very solid points, very solid points. Now, we all talk about how this is going to have an old school football kind of feel, and I think it's pretty much agreed upon. All 3 of us love that. That's the kind of football we all grew up watching. We talk about this game, and we talk about SEC speed all the time, and then the Big Ten and what Big Ten football is like. Who do you think has been prepared the best for this game? And what I mean by prepared is through the games they've played in the regular season, this game's not going to be too big for them. Because when I think about Michigan, and obviously I'm very biased, the biggest game of the year is always Ohio State. And I would say Michigan State closely follows that. Whereas I feel with Georgia, there's multiple big games throughout the year. Am I wrong in saying that? Or do you guys agree with me? And we'll start with you with that question, Jeff.
Well, there's kind of a little bit of a misnomer when they say SEC speed. SEC and Big Ten are built very similar. Right? Both of them love to run the football. Their best teams love to run the football. I think when you look at the Big Ten, the fastest school tends to be Ohio State. Second would be Penn State. Right? But when you look at Michigan, they're pretty solid speed. But Georgia's not. They're not going to overwhelm you with speed. They're going to overwhelm you with power. So this, like I said, this is where you have 2 teams that are built very, very similar, with the exception of the defensive fronts, where Michigan's a little bit lighter, but a lot more athletic and a lot more diverse scheme-wise. Right? Georgia likes to play 2-gap, and they'll mix in some 1-gap stuff. Well, Michigan's going to throw a lot at you. They're going to throw a lot of looks. They got a lot of coverages, a lot of blitz coverages. So when you look at what these 2 schools do, it's not going to be about speed. It's going to be blunt force trauma. Both of these are going to be 2 heavyweights going at it, and whoever lands the biggest blows, the biggest knockout blows, is going to be the school that wins.
And Bill.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing – we talked a lot about sort of some interesting matchups. I think we're going to see both teams try to draw the quarterbacks into making a mistake, right? That's what you want. You want that quarterback to either make a mistake, like I said, by holding the football, give me a chance to sack him, maybe get a strip sack, or to put the ball into danger. And that means you're going to see some inverts, right? We talked about how in the case of Michigan, obviously they bring in Coach McDonald, who just came up from the Ravens, and, the Harbaugh brothers, sort of handed him from one Harbaugh brother to the other. So they're going to try to throw looks at Bryce Young, who's certainly seen some disguised coverage, but he hasn't seen all the things that they're going to throw at him. So we'll see how the Heisman Trophy winner deals with some of that. He's going to see some things where, guys are going to be places where they weren't supposed to be, some lurking, some robber stuff. I guarantee you're going to see some things where, guys are going to fall off of guys that you thought they were covering and slide into places you didn't expect them in passing lanes. So that's going to be something to monitor. And then obviously, as was already mentioned, Aiden Hutchinson and Ojabo, can you either through moving them around or through neutralizing those guys, either by running the ball at them, which, I mean, if you're able to run the football, that changes the math, right? That changes all those things. You're not worried as much about now we don't have to chip. Now we have to do all this other stuff because this guy's he's not playing with his ears laid back all the time. He's now checking before he comes upfield as opposed to just in that track stance all the time. And then the other thing for me is the wide receiver core of each team has not been talked about much, right? Now, obviously, when Bell got hurt, Michigan lost probably their one true blade fast, right? The true deep threat, the true guy who could actually just run past people. And so the guys that are left are, once again, solid. They're good football players, but, they're not guys that maybe terrify you exactly. And to some extent, Georgia's sort of in the same boat, through a combination of things like injuries and other stuff. Ladd McConkey, is obviously a guy that works the slot well. He is tough and smart. Jermaine Burton is a guy that's sort of just beginning to figure it out, just a sophomore. They're really young also. I mean,
they are.
They're super young. It's just all freshmen and sophomores. And one redshirt junior mixed in for flavor and Karis Jackson. But they're super young, which is why Brock Bowers has had this extraordinary season. I mean, he's very talented, but also he's trustworthy. Yeah. And the other guys I've just named aren't always. They aren't always running at the right depth. They aren't always doing the thing they're supposed to do. Adonai Mitchell is also someone to monitor. I think he might be one of those people. Someone said if there is a play to be made, once again, a baby, right? So young. But physical ability is there. But they haven't been consistent, right? Except Brock Bowers, right? That's the one thing you can point to say that's a consistent threat in the passing game. And Michigan's tight ends, they aren't the same kind of route runners and obviously don't have the kind of speed. They're very reliable and they're big, tough. I mean, they're old school tight ends. I mean,
say a typical Michigan tight end.
Right. I mean, Shoemaker is the more athletic of the two, but he's not exactly small. And then, and Eric All, I mean, I kind of jokingly call him a flex tackle. So they've got a bunch of tight ends. They're all 248 to 255-ish. And they all can get it done as blockers. And so I mentioned earlier that the counters, right? If Michigan's counters work, I mean, they do other stuff, but to me, it's about the counters. And you mentioned, obviously, the inside zone and outside zone, and they'll run that too. But if they're counters, because look at the big plays they've gotten in the run game. When they popped one, where Blake Corum or Haskins goes off for 20, 30 yards.
They've all been plays of offensive linemen pulling.
They're counters, particularly that counter, right? That GTE counter, right? Where they'll pull a tight end, they'll pull a tackle, they'll pull a guard, they'll pull, like I said, they'll pull half the team, it seems like. And when they get that going, I don't care how many enormous people you have on the interior of your defense. If you've got that counter game going, now you've sort of neutralized that, because what do you want a 360-pound guy to do? Chase, right? That's what you want him doing.
Gas him out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Let's make him chase. And now that, to me, that's really the key to this game. If their counter game is working for Michigan, that sets up everything off of it. Now you boot the quarterback off of it with that counter look, and now he's got abilities to hit that tight end dragging across the field, or maybe even a deep play down the field, or if not that, he tucks it and runs it for 7 yards. But to me, if that counter game's rolling, Michigan has a good chance to win.
Now let's talk about the coaches real fast. We talked about at the beginning of the conversation, two guys that have always been the bridesmaid, never the bride. And we know, especially me being a Michigan fan, the high expectations we have since day one with Jim Harbaugh, probably unrealistic expectations, but then he didn't really do much of anything for most of our opinions. And now he's here. Kirby Smart going up against the elephant in the room, which is always Nick Saban. And you think this is his season because Alabama's not Alabama, as everybody said, and they have this great defense. And then what happened in the SEC championship game happened. When we talk about these two coaches, I don't know. I think they're both under pressure, so I won't really ask you who's under the most pressure. But, Jeff, who do you think it's more important to get off to a fast start? Kirby Smart in Georgia, or is it more important for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan to get off to a fast start?
I believe it's going to be Michigan. And the reason why is if they fall behind early and big, right? And I'm not talking just 7-0. I'm talking about 14-0, things of that nature. It's going to be a lot harder for them versus that defense to mount this huge comeback. If they're trading blows, they fall behind 7-0, they fall behind 7-3, they get a stop, they come back down the field and get a touchdown or even a field goal. If they're in a game where it's tit for tat, where they're not so much trying to chase a bigger lead, they'll be all right against Georgia. But if they allow Georgia to get on top of them, it's going to be hard to get Georgia off. And that's going to be the main thing about it. I think if Michigan were to flip it, I think Georgia at some point can find a way to do things where they can get at Michigan. Well, whether it's wearing down that front of Michigan, because like we said, Michigan's front is athletic. They're big, but not that big. All right. So I think Georgia's still going to find room to run the football. It may happen more later than early in the game. So as long as they're not getting blown out, Georgia's going to be in this game. This is not going to be one of those games that's going to be a blowout unless somebody plays very, very poorly. This is going to be a very close game where they're going to hit each other hard. And I think what's going to be the best matchup as far as a team that can come back is going to be if Michigan gets ahead on Georgia. I think if Michigan falls behind double digits, it's going to be a hard climb for them.
What are your thoughts on that, Bill? Who's more important to get to a fast start? Is it important to Georgia or is it more important to Michigan to get off to a fast start?
Yeah. Obviously, both teams want to get out of the gates fast, but Jeff is 100% correct, Jeff. This is going to be a game where, frankly, none of these teams are really set up to come back from 2 touchdowns or more. Right? That's not what either team is really built around. These are teams that are both towards the bottom in terms of vertical passing game. These are both teams that are not great at passing the ball vertically. So both teams, when they throw the ball, really are sort of throwing it, a lot of crossers, a lot of that stuff, right? Middle of the field. And then when they do throw it outside the numbers, it's short stuff outside the numbers, quick outs and shoot routes and angle routes and that kind of stuff. So you're not set up to get big plays in the passing game. And McNamara, I believe, has one 300-yard game. I think that was the Michigan State game where he went for, 383. Correct. And other than that, he's mostly been, once again, I'll use the term, game managing. I know some people don't like the term, but frankly, when your defense is good and your running game is good, that's really what you want your quarterback to do, manage the game. But yes, Jeff's 100% correct. It is more likely that Georgia can survive if they have to fight back from 10 points down or maybe not more, though, because neither of these offenses are really – it's funny, we just watched a game where a team could come back from 20 nothing, right? Oh, whatever. Yeah, who cares? We'll score 3 touchdowns in 8 minutes. No big deal. This is the exact opposite, right? Like this game, I think 45 points might be scored by both teams in this game.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that.
Lost the game we just watched, right? 45 points was enough to win that game. So this is going to be a very great contrast, right? If your grandfather walked out of this game disgusted, tell him to come back and watch. He didn't like that game. Tell him to come back. This is the game for him. But yeah, Michigan really does need to. I think they need early success for 2 reasons. One, it settles your team down, right? Because you've been hearing about Georgia and how they eat babies and whatever else, right? And so you need to get past that initial surge of showing that we belong here and all that good stuff. And then the second thing that comes from getting that early lead is you start to put pressure on what they don't want to do on offense. Now you're saying you guys might need to throw the ball a little bit more than you were originally planning to, but that's not what that's not good for them. So yes, if Michigan get up 2 scores early, this is a very different ball game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely agree with you in that part. Well, comes to the moment of truth. I was the lone wolf in the last game. I started it off first, so we'll start with Jeff first. Orange Bowl, Michigan Wolverines, Georgia Bulldogs. Not only who do you think wins, Jeff and Bill, but why? So we'll start with you, Jeff. Who wins this game and why?
All right, so there are going to be a lot of happy fans in Ann Arbor when I say 23-17 Michigan. As I'm going to tell you why. I think it's going to be what we talked about, a tough blue-collar game. Both teams are going to try to run the football. They're going to try and hit big plays off the play action. Their defenses are going to play stout. There's going to be some turnovers. There's going to be some missed field goals. There's going to be some stall drives. Somebody's going to take that gamble on fourth down. But in the end, I think there's two players that are going to make the difference for Michigan in this game, and it's not going to be with their hands. It's going to be with their bodies. It's going to be all in Shoemaker, right? And the reason being, I don't think Michigan is going to have the success running the football inside. Bill said a lot about counters. I think that's part of it. But I think where they're going to make their money in the running game is going to be off tackle and outside. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to try and hit inside. Those big bodies of Georgia are going to slow them down. And then they're going to find ways to run the football off tackles, whether it's outside zone, whether it's trap, whether it's wham blocks, even with the zone, the kick zone, they like to run backside with a tight end comes all the way back across the formation.
Yep.
Right. What they're going to do is those tight ends are going to make huge dividends in that running game for them. And then when they finally get Georgia to overcommit to the run, one of them is going to make a big play in the passing game or for play action. So I think that's where this game is going to be won. I think both defenses are going to have their shine at times. I think those offenses are going to find some rhythm at points, but struggle because those defenses are stout. They're both built the same way offensively. But overall, when you look at it, the tight ends from Michigan are very, very able blockers, very, very good at what they do. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to be the big difference for them running the football that's going to open up the play action game. And that one big pass that's going to win it all for them.
So we have Jeff going with Michigan. And Bill, who do you have winning this game and why?
This is a tough one. This is to me the tougher of the two games to pick is this one. I agree with everything Jeff said, with one exception.
Uh-oh.
I think that on one of those plays to one of those tight ends, a linebacker or a safety comes and pokes the ball out late in the game, and we get a game-winning late score from Georgia. I think Georgia pulls this out very late in a very close game, 24-20. And once again, I'd love to be wrong, Joe. I just feel like they have a lot of playmakers on that defense, and if they can force Michigan to throw the ball, I think the point of inflection is about 26 passes, right? If Michigan can keep it under 26 passes, I think they have a very good chance to win. I think at 26 or more spells victory for Georgia, and I think they get Michigan to throw the ball a little bit more than they wanted to.
Okay, so we're tied up here. Of course, you already know where I'm going.
Yes, I think we did.
I'm picking Michigan, but I'm going to say we're going to win this game 28-14. And the reason why I think Michigan scores all these points is because the Michigan defense is tired of hearing about Georgia for the last 2 or 3 weeks. As if they have no stars and no studs on that side of the ball. I think it's going to be. I think for Georgia, it's going to be death by screens and draws. And you know that Jim Harbaugh will run the wide receiver bubble until he can't run the wide receiver bubble anymore, no matter what kind of success he has or doesn't have. But I think when you have a pass rush like Georgia's, you slow it down with the draws, like Jeff mentioned, also the screen game. And I think that Georgia falls behind, and because their offense is somewhat limited, they're not able to recover. So I got Michigan winning this game.
And the bubble is an extension of your run game, right? So yeah, we go as a pass play. It's an extension of the running game.
Yeah, for sure. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, me and Jeff were talking earlier how much we would have loved to have seen a Michigan-Cincinnati matchup, which would have really been a slobber knocker fest. But I'll take what we got. And I think this is going to be a very, very competitive game. Not saying that the other game won't be, but if you're a person that loves old school, in the trenches, punch you in the mouth football, all we're missing with this game is some snow. That'd be perfect. But I'm sure the players love the weather down there at the Orange Bowl. But man, if this game was played like in a frozen tundra, like Lambeau Field, it'd be perfect.
I wish there were a bowl game played in Lambeau Field. That would be awesome. We should talk to some people, Joe. Let's make some calls.
Yeah, we got some power, but I don't know if we have that much power to make Lambeau Field a destination for a bowl game. I feel like the Pinstripe Bowl is about as close as we're going to get to frozen tundra, and even that's a baseball field.
Well, if Fenway would have got off, you'd have the Fenway Bowl too.
Yeah, that's true. And that would have been, that might have even been more of a frozen tundra. Yeah, for sure.
About that time of year up there, it's cold.
Absolutely. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much for joining me and breaking down these two semifinal games. Now, before we get off the air, I just want to give you guys an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you guys have thought about bowl season so far. We'll start with you, Jeff. Just some of your thoughts on what you think about the games and the season so far and college football as a whole. I mean, obviously, battling COVID-19 the whole year. I think to make it as far as we have, obviously commendable to the athletes and to the universities. But what are some of your thoughts on the bowl season so far this year?
I think we've seen a pretty competitive bowl season. We haven't seen a ton of blowouts. We haven't seen a bunch of uneven matchups. So far, they did a great job putting some games together. Teams have done a great job of preparing, entertaining games. Fans are getting the offense that they hope for. They haven't been getting the 10-7 games, the 13-6 games. So overall, I think it's a very entertaining season. I'm proud of what we've seen from these young men. I say kids because I'm 40-something years old, but they're young men. And overall, plain and simple, I think what we're going to see this weekend is going to be the icing on the cake that we've had so far.
And Mr. Carroll.
The things that stuck with me, first of all, Jeff's dead on all those things. I really wish, since there is a pandemic in place, that whenever they had teams that needed a dance partner, that they had some sort of contingency plan built in place. Hey, if you lose an opponent, and you lose an opponent, guess what? You two playing each other. Boom. Get on a plane, right? I mean, it's hard to explain, and I think has played at least a little bit of football. When you know it's your last game, right? And I wasn't even good. I was terrible. But I remember very distinct. Trust me. I was very aware of who I was.
I was honorable mention all practice team. I'll leave it at
that. I'm very aware of what I was as a player, but I was very aware of, this is my final time doing this, right? And nothing's like it. There's nothing quite like it. I mean, there's nothing else you can do in your life that's like putting on pads and running full speed into another human being. And then at the end of it, they shake your hand and talk to you, as opposed to hiring a lawyer or calling the police. I mean, there's nothing else like it. Nothing else in my life has been like it. I've done other things that were super exciting. I've jumped out of airplanes into nothing but darkness. I've done lots of interesting things in my life, but nothing's quite like, my main contribution was being L3 on kickoff coverage. That I can't imagine anything being more exciting, right? It's the most, birth of my daughter. But other than that, I can't imagine anything in my life that was more exciting than that. And even though I was a marginal player at best, it meant so much to me. And when I realized that this is the last time I'm going to do this, you spend some time just sort of walking around, smelling the air and, looking at everything and trying to take a picture in your brain of what's going on around you. And for these players, the guys from NC State and some of the other players who
brutal.
Right?
Yeah, that was brutal to watch.
Yeah, I know. That was. There should be some contingency, like I said. Hey, man, look, let's make this happen. Whatever it takes, right? If it doesn't end up being televised, whatever. We're gonna find you an opponent. We're gonna get you a game, right? That's how I would handle it. Whatever it takes, we're gonna find you an opponent. You're gonna play somebody, and that's my final thought. Is we should always, no matter what happens, find a way so that these guys don't get this torn away from them.
Yeah, and I think a big takeaway from that too, I was thinking about while you were talking, Bill, too, is think about the sacrifice for the holiday. Hey, we're gonna miss Christmas with our families. Exactly. We had an opportunity to have Christmas with our families because of the vaccine, but no. I want to finish off my season right, especially for these seniors. We'll go to the Bahamas early, or we'll go to San Diego early. We'll quarantine, do things the right way to be as safe as possible, so they can play this game. And then, literally hours before kickoff or days before the game, hey, by the way, there is no game, and all that hard work and sacrifice pretty much for nothing. I can't imagine the feeling.
Yep.
So I agree with you guys 100%. Well, hey,
why am I not surprised that Chip Kelly was in the middle of this?
Whoa, Chip Kelly catching a stray on our football play playoff game.
Hey, never missed opportunity to get your target. I can respect that, Jeff.
Yeah, listen, it didn't shock me. I'm just stating the fact. It didn't shock me.
Isn't he the one that has all kinds of devices on his players? Check your heart rate and oxygen levels and a nutritionist to make sure you're eating the right things. How could this possibly happen to the great UCLA? What is going on over there? Shocking.
Apparently, the smoothie bar didn't also have like sneeze guards or whatever to take care of this, I guess.
And they're Jordan brand now, too. I mean, he's making all kinds of major moves at that school, except they're all on the field. But they beat LSU. They can hold their hat on that one. You can hang your hat in the fact that you beat, again, like we were talking about with Alabama. It's not your big brother's LSU team, but it's still LSU. That's a big
The SEC as a whole was down this year. I know people don't like to say that or think it, but I said it before the season, and it proved to be true.
No, you're definitely right.
I can't be totally hateful because plain and simple, he got a guy that won a championship fired. So, if he didn't beat Orgeron might still be there at LSU.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Well, hey, make sure you guys tune into all our NFL draft coverage as well. As we get close to the NFL draft, these two gentlemen will be all over it with weekly shows talking about the prospects that you should be looking out for come April and interviewing and talking to some of those prospects as well. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, Bill Carroll, Jeff Barnes, I'm Joe Cardozo. We've been watching the Nuts and Bolts Sports College Playoff Preview Show. And until next time, we'll catch you guys. Be safe and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. Watch lots of football.
Wash your hands.
That was a pretty clean run considering.